Welcome to Lesson 2 on Character Development. Let's begin by talking a little bit about classic comedy character types. From its beginning, comedy has often been based on a character type. It's a stereotype in that it's an exaggerated model we recognize and understand. This kind of character is valuable in comedy shorts, like cartoons and comedy video games, because we already know that character and what to expect. It saves us a lot of time in writing. We don't have to set up a new character for the audience, but we can go immediately into the story and the gags. We laugh when the character does the funny thing that we have come to expect, and we laugh when he does something off the wall that we don't expect. One character that I suggest that you have in every one of your video games is called the inflexible character, and they are great for comedy. You can think of these characters as a character with some sort of comic defect. So, for example, like Homer Simpson, Donald Duck, and Grinch. These types of characters you can bounce off the world for him using conflict and contrast. Next, let's talk a little bit about classic comedy types versus creating a character that's based on negative stereotypes. Now, when you're writing your character about someone of the opposite sex, someone older or younger, or someone with disabilities, or someone from another culture or lifestyle than the one you know well, consider what you write. Be aware of nuances. Think of people in terms of multiple dimensions. What do these characters do in their spare time? What are their relationships, socially, at play, at school, or at work? Whether you're developing characters or just writing a scene, consider who would normally be in that location in real life. Who would be in there in New York or Detroit? Who would be there in New Delhi or Beijing? What races, nationalities, social economic classes, occupations, sexes, and ages would be there? Developing different characters into your game, series, or film in places where you would normally find them and in places where they could be. Value diversity. Prize differing beliefs and culture values besides the traditional ones you may know. Make minorities active, not passive. Avoid casting minorities as victims, or if they must be the victim, let them overcome this by themselves. Do your best in your game to not cast disparities on individuals, or even on yourself. If you come from a group and you constantly poke fun at it, make sure you're doing it in the light that isn't disparaging to your people. Now let's get a little bit deeper in the different types of characters, because different kinds of stories have different kinds of characters. For example, realistic characters are often found in modern stories, in dramas, and are multi-dimensional. These characters have feelings and attitudes just like real people who can see what motivates them. They act like people we know. Then there's the classic hero, which is found in classic tales, often oral histories. You can think of this as, from our last lecture, we talked a little bit about the hero's journey. This story is meant to teach us an important truth. The classic hero has some realistic traits and some that were more symbolic that made this character bigger than life. This character is an adventurer, a person of action, a warrior. Often the hero goes on quests with much demanded of them along the way. They may find a mentor, undergo tests, as you know already, the classic hero's journey story. Then we have fantasy characters. To be honest with you, you can think of these as a little bit more of a romantic character. Often they live in a magical world with powers that can be used for good or evil. They're more realistic and less exaggerated. They usually have a limited number of traits. They may look different, and their physical characters might extend to their personalities. Much of the fun of these characters is the fish out of water conflicts they have. The world could be a nightmare world or a world of fondness dreams. And then we have non-human characters, which to be honest with you are kind of my favorite. They often personify certain human traits. For example, think of Pooh, who's always hungry, or Scooby-Doo, who's always scared. Usually only a few traits are given to these characters, and the audience can identify with these traits. These qualities may stem from the properties or physical appearances of the animal or object itself. For example, a cat uses its eyes like a soldier with night vision weapon or a stick of gum. Now we have symbolic characters, which are meant to represent a trait or idea. They're one-dimensional and stand for qualities like love or evil or justice or fear. We find these characters quite often in myths, comics, book stories, fairy tales, and other fantasies. The ancient Greeks and Romans used these characters, and they appeared in the morality plays of the Middle Ages and in the Punch and Judy shows later. There are no gray areas in these personalities. And then lastly, there's the everyman character, which represents the ordinary man or woman or even a child. This character is less specific and more symbolic. This character has more than one trait, but is generally, and we should always be able to see ourselves in this character. Once you've selected what type of character you have, let's talk a little bit about how you could take your character further. We want to consider other ways to develop our character. For instance, is your character like anyone you know? Who does the character resemble? An actor, an actress, or one of the characters they play? And in what way? Stay away from characters that have been overdone. Does thinking about this real or fantasy person give you any ideas to make your character funnier or more realistic? Is the character a combination of people, a juxtaposition of traits giving you something we wouldn't expect? You might want to take this real or fantasy character and then give it personality, a new twist. Observe people and use your observations. Try taking some real traits that you observed and add funny traits to make your character unique. Quality characters are often more complex. This may explain why they tend to have more lasting appeal. Make a list of inconsistencies in your character. Really think about things too, like what is different, fascinating, compelling? What makes your character funny? Now, once you have all of the attributes, you've really fleshed out your character, now you need to think about, well, how would my character react in a story? So if we're creating characters for a video game, in opposed to a short series or TV series or like comic or whatever, anything other than games really, then you want to develop your characters to best tell a specific story. So almost think about it as a linear, non-linear way of doing it because they're exploring a world. Remember, characters have conflicts and dramas and do funny things in comedy because they're so different. So their values in life must be different. Your character must be created with personalities that best express a conflict that connects to a game mechanic. So if they have conflict or values, you want to almost indicate a theme. Now, what a theme is it centers around the core values that are expressed in your game. So for instance, with Mario Brothers, the primary theme is saving the princess, but the primary game mechanic that goes along with it is defying gravity. So you want to tie that all into the basic message or lesson that the protagonist learns, which in our case is, Mario. You may want your main character to reveal something about the theme to us, but probably not in words. Maybe the character represents one point of view, jumping, things like that, or one mechanic. And then the villain opposes him by presenting that opposing view. So it shoots fireballs that can detect. If you think about Mega Man, for example, another great example, the character needs to go on this trait, power up in order to develop the skills they need in order to develop or beat an enemy. But just remember, each character should have his own or her own motivations for feeling the way they do within your story. And also do your best, and this is one of the most difficult things I find in video games, is to have your audience identify really and connect with the character itself. So identify right away, like what are the major characteristics are, and able to tell them apart easily by name, sight, or personality.